Good evening. At this time, I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting this evening. We do, because of COVID precautions, we are in a hybrid meeting with some of us present at the Emergency Response Center, the Merit Center, and some of the council connected by distance. So I will at this time ask City Clerk Kyle Box to take the roll.
Mayor Burns.
Here.
Craig Schaefer.
Here.
Steve Meister.
Here.
Don Edblum.
Here.
John DeCramer.
Here.
Russ Labatt.
Here.
Jim Lazinski.
Here.
And the council is all present. We do have an agenda before us. Are there any changes to that agenda? If not, we'll operate under that agenda. And we'll move to agenda item number 2, which would be to consider nominations and appointment of the City Council President Pro Tem. The President Pro Tem, if the mayor would become unavailable, incapacitated, or could, for whatever reason, not perform the duties, then the President Pro Tem would step in. So at this time, I'll open up for nominations for President Pro Tem.
Mr. Mayor,
Craig?
I'd like to nominate John DeCramer, and then I would also like to move that nomination cease and we cast a unanimous ballot.
Second.
A motion by Craig for the nomination, as well as the nomination, as well as the motion to close nominations, cast a unanimous ballot. That was seconded by Steve, I believe, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Seconded by Steve.
Yeah.
Now, discussion on that motion. First off, Councilmember DeCramer, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Are there any other discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote on the motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for John DeCramer as President Pro Tem. Kyle, would you take the vote?
Mayor Burns.
Yes.
Craig Schaefer.
Yes.
Steve Meister.
Yes.
Don Edblum.
Yeah.
John DeCramer.
Abstain.
Russ Labatt.
Yes.
Jim Lazinski.
Yes.
And that motion does pass. Thank you, John, for your service.
Thank you.
We'll move then to agenda item number 3, consider approval of the minutes of the last regular council meeting that was held on January 12th, 2021. Council does have the minutes. Are there any corrections?
I make the motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns.
Yes.
Craig Schaefer.
Yes.
Steve Meister.
Yes.
Don Edblum.
Yeah.
John DeCramer.
Yes.
Russ Labatt.
Yes.
Jim Lazinski.
Yes.
And the motion passes. We'll move then to the consent agenda, bringing the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda. And they include, consider the engagement letter for audit services for 2020 financial statements, consider the approval of the resolution authorizing the submission of the 2021 pay equity implementation report for the wastewater treatment facilities improvement project. We have a payment invoice to Bolton and Mink. Consider authorization for the request of proposals for a South 4th Street and Country Club Drive intersection study. Consider the renewal of American Engineering Incorporated testing professional services agreement, and this would be subject to review by city attorney. Consider the renewal of the unlicensed maintenance electrician inspection agreement. The bituminous overlay project, consider the authorization to advertise for bids and the bills and project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purpose of a separate discussion?
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
John Edblum,
Yeah.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes.
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And that motion also passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 12, consider nominations to the Charter Commission. The Charter Commission can be made up of no fewer than 7 and no more than 15 members. The role of the city is to make nominations, and they will be forwarded to the district court judge to for the appointments. And the charter itself is can be compared to the Constitution. Is really the overarching regulatory and organizational structure that the city abides by. So the Charter Commission plays an important function. There's been a number of names that have been nominated by city council members, and I'll read those names off. They include Mike Fox, Mark Mather, Mark Claith, Larry McGraw, and Amanda Schroeder, all of which are eligible to serve on the Charter Commission because they are of voting age and they're residents of the city of Marshall. So I'd offer that those names that were nominated by the council and entertain a motion to forward those names to the district court judge for consideration for appointment to the Charter Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Russ. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
John Edblum,
Yeah.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes.
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. I'm sorry, Dennis, did you want to make any comments about the Charter Commission? Okay.
Fine.
We'll move then to agenda item number 13. Consider the request of Monty Buncher for a variance adjustment permit. The location is 516A Main Street East. This was considered by the Planning Commission, which has its recommendation for approval. Mr. Buncher is in attendance at the meeting this evening, so I'll turn this over to Ilya Gutman, connected to this meeting.
Yes,
I will turn to Ilya to introduce this item.
thank you, Mayor Council. This is a request to use a shipping container as a permanent storage next to a building at the address listed above. The ordinance prohibits using shipping containers actually in 2 places, and the sections are listed there. To grant a variance, both city ordinance and the state statutes require the presence of practical difficulties, and they're defined both in the ordinance and the state statutes. Basically, the state statute said that only if those practical difficulties are present, the variance can be granted. And the finding of facts attached to this thing as part of this memo explain those in details. Shipping containers in general do not meet building codes, and they do not fit into typical city environments. So that's kind of makes it, they stand out for various reasons. So between those and requirements of state statutes and city ordinance, the staff recommends that this variance be denied because there are no practical difficulties. Planning Commission looked at that thing and they recommended approval. And my understanding is the owner is present there, so he may answer additional questions.
Okay, thank you, Ilya. Open up for any additional questions or discussion from the council.
I have a question. Is Dennis in the room there?
Dennis is.
Yes.
Dennis, as we approve these variances, can the state come in and say we're doing these wrong? And the reason I bring that up is I'm in the process of trying to do a variance for my daughter's house up in Duluth. And boy, they make us spell stuff out there where we actually got to explain in the application what the practical difficulty is. Can a state come in and say these variances are not legal?
I'm not sure that the state could intervene, but I do believe that citizens of this community, neighbors, whatever, could object that the city has not followed either the ordinance or the statute in approving these without specific references to practical difficulties and how those practical difficulties would warrant the granting or the denial of a variance.
So in layman's term, if we have citizens who object to this, they could take it to court and we could end up on the losing side in a court case. Because I know financial is not a practical difficulty.
No, it is not.
Okay, and I know I was part of the planning commission when we made this ordinance. We worked on this, and I'm just afraid we're opening Pandora's box here. And I know Craig and I talked about this, but shipping containers are shipping containers. They're not storage sheds. So I think we're opening up Pandora's box and really stretching the rules here. And as I look at other cities, I think we need to revisit how we give out our variances. And I know I even said that when I was on planning commission. So just want to throw those thoughts out there.
Mr. Mayor?
Greg?
Yeah, so Jim and I talked about this morning. I actually talked to Monty about this some time ago when he was initially applying for the variance process. And as I look at this, I look at it a couple of ways. I look at durability, I look at practicality, and I also look at economics. And I look as I go through communities, Marshall included, and there's a number of places where you can either buy the materials and construct a portable storage shed or a storage shed that is similar dimension to what a Connex or a shipping container, Connex box or shipping container is. And to me, the predominant difference and the reason I believe why this doesn't fit in the city ordinance is it looks like a shipping container. But I don't have to, express a lot of my talents that I could take a shipping container and make it look just like a storage shed that I could buy off of a number of lots in the area and legally move it onto my property. And if I bought one small enough, it would even fall under the need for a permit because it would be under 200 square feet for a utility building. And I believe I'm correct, Illy. If I'm not, please step in and correct me.
Yeah, 200 square feet is the borderline.
But if this looked more like a portable storage shed that a property owner can buy and move onto his property, that meets the code, correct?
Correct.
So my solution to this is have Monty put siding on it so it looks like a storage shed, and that's what it is. We just blessed it and changed it to a storage shed.
Okay, other input from the council? Just unless, Dennis, do you have any response to that?
I think a shipping container is a shipping container no matter how you disguise it. And our ordinance, why have the ordinance if you're not going to enforce it? Specifically excludes shipping containers from being a permanent storage facility.
And John?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask why use a shipping container versus either like say a Dakota shed or a typical garage. What's the reasoning for going to the shipping container?
I'm gonna have you
microphone
because we're on being broadcast. So ask the applicant to come to the podium, Monty.
And the reason I'm going the shipping container route is because I don't know how long it's going to be there. Down the road when I retire, I may want to pick that shipping container up and move it to, wherever we end up transitioning to or whatever, to have that continue as a storage container. So I don't want to build a permanent structure because I want to be able to move it.
just for the sake of what we talked about here, like say call them a Dakota shed because that they happen to be in town. Under 200 square feet is they can be moved in and moved out easily. Is that something that you considered, or why not that? Or
Because the shipping container that I'm looking at is actually 320 square feet. So it's a little bit larger, and that's the economics of it for me to bring it in and then be able to move it again it just seemed like the more economical way to go. And after I applied for the variance and looking all over town, the ordinance says shipping containers, semi-trailers, it lists a number of things. And it's, when I was at the planning commission meeting, there's a number of them out there. So I just assumed that with the variance, it wouldn't be an issue.
Other questions the council has?
Mr. Mayor, I just have a question or a comment. Monty talked to me about this too, and I would dare to, and I've lived in Marshall all my life, and I never even knew that building existed back there until Monty told me where it was, and I had to drive back there and look. So I would dare to bet you that the majority of the council, if not all, would drive by Main Street and not even know that building is sitting back there. So they're not going to see that. Nobody in the public is going to see that storage container. The motel, which is directly in front of that, has not objected. So I see no reason why we can't approve this. I mean, it's like Monty said, it's temporary. It could be there for a year, maybe 10 years before he decides to pick up and move, or maybe it's only going to be there for 3 years. So it's a temporary structure, and it's going to allow him to have additional storage bigger than a 10 by 20 building. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Russ. It probably, Monty, I was going to address this to you. You don't need to come up, but the Russ is correct. There's probably visibility is limited from Main Street, but there is visibility from the new school parking area from the rear, probably, right?
Right. Middle school back parking lot, and I think that they thought the one parking lot of the school would have some visibility.
Right. The going back to Councilmember Lazinski's earlier point, and I'll kind of maybe turn this to Ilya also. So as the council, planning commission, and the council has approved some variances in the past, in many cases, it was because there's materials that either weren't defined in the ordinance, new materials come out, or new building materials are being utilized. In the opinion of the staff, could this be one of those cases where, it's a practice that really wasn't contemplated at the time the ordinance was adopted?
Well, the problem is that the ordinance specifically refers to shipping containers. It's not about the finishes. It's about the unit itself. So the term shipping container is used in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Ilya.
I think, Mayor, when this came up, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ilya, it's about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we did this ordinance, and they were starting to pop up around town is a reason that we kind of pursued this ordinance, if I remember correctly from my time on planning and zoning.
I think you're correct.
And they are, I know we're opening up, I think we're opening up Pandora's box. They say that building's back there and nobody sees it. There's people along Main Street that have their yards backed up to that building. I'm very familiar with that building in that area. Obviously, I grew up next to that building. So it's been there for many, many years. That building's been there probably 60, 70 years. But there are businesses back, there are residents backed up to that building. There's also a school backed up. We're going to also back our new school up to that building. So I'm just leery about, again, opening up Pandora's box, because 7 years ago, we had trouble with this, and that's why we made the ordinance 6, 7 years ago.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, again.
That's correct.
And I look at this and I understand. I mean, I don't want a shipping container in my backyard, in my neighbor's backyard. I don't want to set up a camp shipping container that looks like shipping containers. But in the DIY world and other things of taking things and making them something else, or better than that, making them look like something else, If I did a little bit of work on a weekend, I could take a shipping container and I'd challenge you to tell me it's not a Dakota shed. And there's a substantial difference in structure and durability, and nothing against the Dakota sheds, but a shipping container has a substantially greater durability and lifetime and usability than a Dakota shed, especially in the purpose that I think Monty's looking for. I don't want to make these exceptions, although that's exactly what a variance is individual case specific. But this possibly might be a case where we need to revisit something that we did in the past, doing the right thing for the right reasons, but not able to foresee all the different situations. And as a shipping container looking like a shipping container, I support not having that. But a shipping container with a dressing on it that doesn't look like a shipping container, that it, as I look at the issues in the ordinance, and the reason to deny this is about visual and fit appeal, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's about aesthetics and looking similar to the adjacent properties. And I think with a little bit of work, this could look very fitting with the adjacent properties. And that's my concern, is that we're banning it because of what it looks like, not because of the purpose it serves or what it could be.
Ilya, I have another question on a shed that, let's say we put up a 320 square foot shed. That shed has to somehow be tied to the ground so it doesn't fly, correct?
It has to be tied to the ground, and it has to meet the building code. Correct.
So how is the, if we make the variance, how would we tie a shipping container to the ground so it doesn't become a projectile in a tornado? And how do we make it meet the building code?
I don't know. I didn't give any thoughts to that thing.
Because like Craig, you're saying, if we're gonna do this, we gotta make it have the same rules as a 320 square foot shed in the building code then.
Do we allow Dakota sheds larger than 200 square feet?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, then I don't see the difference here. That's my problem, is we're picking on this because of what it's called, not because of what it really is. And I have a problem with that.
If it could be brought up to the same standards in the building code as a shed, I would not necessarily oppose it, Craig, which means it has to be tied to a slab of concrete, but, you know, so on and so forth, because I know the sheds have to be tied down.
But a Dakota shed does not.
It does, Ilya, correct? It's over 320 square feet. It has to be to the ground.
It doesn't matter what size it is. They all have to be tied to the ground. They don't need.
So Dakota sheds are tied to the ground?
Yes, they must be tied to the ground. There's a special provision in the ordinance that requires all accessory buildings to be tied to the ground.
So that's no different than a trailer house tie down then, correct?
Maybe similar, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
so I kind of I see both arguments. On the one hand, I live right by there, so I can see things in the middle of winter, with a short little walk. I'm a little concerned again about the new school going in there and having a storage shed or a shipping container, and that's setting a precedence. On the other hand, if you can make it look nice, that's the key. It's got to look like it fits. And a shipping container would look like it fits temporarily, like no more than a month to get your shipping done. But for storage unit semi-permanent, I would agree with Councilmember Lazinski. On the other hand, if you can make it look good and you fix it like any shed to a slab of concrete, I don't see what the problem would be as long as it looks good. And I understand the ordinance, and if we don't enforce the ordinance, why do we have it? Well, you know, you can make the shipping containers into homes. There's all sorts of people have done them, and I've seen them on TV, and they look really nice. They're really nice homes. But again, that would take the work of Mr. Buncher to promise and commit to doing that. If we were to give the variance, I will only vote for the variance if we put the caveat that it's got to be looking similar to other buildings or looking like a storage shed, not a shipping container.
And Steve, I agree with you. If we can, and as I said, Elliot, if we can make this comply to the code, I would support it too, such as our appearance code tied to the ground, because basically then you have a steel building instead of a shipping container. So it has to somehow meet the code. And And that goes to you, Dennis. Can we put conditions on a variance?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Also, I'm looking, Ilya, what's the definition of permanent? Our ordinance says it cannot be a permanent storage structure. Mr. Bunger is saying it's temporary, up to 10 years. How do we define permanent?
I believe there is a provision in the ordinance which allows this kind of storage for up to, as an interim use, so up to 6 months.
All right, thank you. I just didn't see the word permanent defined in what was provided to us tonight.
There's no definition of permanent, but building code usually looks at that as 180 days. And as I said, the interim use permit can be issued for any practical anything for up to 180 days. And I think there's even special provision in the ordinance which allows this as an interim use for up to 180 days.
But he's applying for a variance.
Correct.
It's a permanent storage unit, but if he calls it a temporary storage facility, does he need a variance?
Well, again, if it is 180 days or less, then it can be changed to interim use. And it will be a totally different situation. So in this case, he won't need a variance, he will need an interim use if it's 180 days.
I believe his intent is to be more than 180 days. So, and I don't want to speak for Monty, but that's my understanding is he's looking for more than 180 days.
That's correct.
Yeah, that was my understanding too.
So Monty, you can see the direction some of the council are suggesting is that the on the condition that the shipping container be brought up to building codes, meaning the somewhat of a permanent foundation, tie down, the appearance of the siding. If that was conditions on there, is that something that would still make sense? You would still be interested in pursuing the variance?
You know, somebody brought up the point about if you're not going to enforce the ordinance, why have it? And I wanted to go about this the right way and get the variance because that's what the ordinance has said. And it's going to be a new one-trip shipping container. So it doesn't look like it's been across the ocean 14 times. It's very, you know, new looking, new paint, not rusted or anything like that. But I would entertain the idea of putting a finish on it, although I'd have to look at the cost difference between the concrete slab and the finish to put on the shipping container.
Would there be a preference to table this for 2 weeks while you take a look at that rather than decide either up and down now, or I'm asking a question.
Yeah, that would be an option that I would entertain. If that's the council's wishes to.
That actually might be fair to you, because rather than the council putting some conditions on that you find that
Objectionable.
yeah, that you couldn't move forward with anyway, well, you know, at least you'd have time to do a little bit of searching on that. So
Research, sure.
sure.
You know, asking really if there's a timeline on how soon you need the shed.
No, at this point, I'm just waiting for the variance too. I've got it tentatively ordered, but just waiting for the variance.
Yeah, Ilya, I have a quick question because Monty said concrete, but I believe you don't need concrete to tie down the building.
You are correct. You don't need to.
He doesn't need to do a concrete slab underneath. It's just
Right.
he has to tie it down somehow, Monty. So, you know, that's a cost you don't need to have.
I would make a motion to table this or till our next meeting to give an opportunity to review the possible costs of improving the cosmetics.
I second it.
Motion by John, seconded by Craig to table for 2 weeks. Don, I think you were also wanted to say something.
No, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so now we'll move then with discussion on the motion to table. If there's no discussion on the motion to table, we'll move to a vote. Kyle, would you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
John Edblum,
Yeah.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll move then to agenda item number 14, consider the adoption of the ordinance amending Chapter 2, Article 6, Subdivision 6, all related to the Human Rights Commission. I'll call on Kyle Box.
Thank you, Mayor Burns. As you know, or staff, as well as yourself, Councilmember DeCramer, and City Administrator Sharon Hanson, along with other staff and community members, have been meeting since this fall on developing this ordinance change. This is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. So the draft ordinance tonight is really just the next step in making this an official commission, as well as appointing some of the members tonight as well as a recommended action as well. If there are any questions from the committee, I'd be happy to answer them or
Okay, thank you, Kyle, and thank you for your work as well as the others that have been working on this for a number of months. We'll open it up for any questions.
One question, do we need to do this in two motions? Or
It'll be two motions, yes.
two motions? Okay.
So the first motion in order would be to adopt the ordinance.
Make a motion to adopt the ordinance as spelled out.
Second.
The motion by John, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
John Edblum,
Yeah.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. And then the second action would be appointment of a number of the members, and these are largely the members who have kind of put the time in so far as, to get to this point, with the exception of there's one member or one person who has put a lot of time in there, who was Nancy Shaw, who will be relocating from the community sometime in 2021. So she's not listed on there. In addition to that, you note that there's two additional openings that could be filled, but this would provide a core so the commission can get going. Kyle, anything you want to add to that? Any questions from the council on the nominations to be the initial appointees to this commission? If not, is there a motion to make those appointments?
So moved.
second,
Motion by Steve, seconded by Russ. Discussion? Now we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
John Edblum,
Yeah.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion passes. Agenda item number 15, the establishment of the Comprehensive Plan Proposal Review Committee. I'll call on Jason Anderson, City Engineer, Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor. The city is currently advertising a request for proposals for an update to our city comprehensive plan. As we all know, the comp plan is the primary planning document for the city of Marshall. So it'll be a very public process once we get into working through that update. But first, we need to receive proposals, and they're due on February 3rd. To help review proposals and grade them and make recommendation to the council, we'd like to propose a committee be put together to do that. And the mayor kind of started this process at the last meeting by recommending 2 council members. But we would look for the committee to look something like shown the memo there, with 2 city council members, Don Edblum as liaison to the Planning Commission, and Dr. Meister or John DeCramer as liaison to the EDA, one or the other. a planning commission member, and the planning commission at their last meeting recommended Amanda Schroeder, an EDA board member, and I believe Lauren Dietz has worked with the EDA board, and they've identified Dan Herman. We're thinking 2 city staff people, likely Ilya Gutman and Lauren Dietz at this point in time. And then we've reached out to the chamber for a recommendation, and we have one as well, and Eric Eben. So we have a group put together that we think could serve as this committee. And today we're looking for the council, or tonight we're looking for the council to authorize the establishment of this committee to meet 3 or 4 times, go through a process of reviewing proposals and interviewing consultants and making that recommendation to bring forward to the council. I think that's all I've got unless there's any questions. And I think Ilya is still on the line to answer any other questions as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. We'll open up for any questions the council may have. If not, I'd entertain a motion to have this ad hoc committee be formed, purpose as outlined, to review proposals for the comprehensive plan consultant.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns?
Yes?
Craig Schaefer?
Yes.
Steve Meister?
Yes.
Don Edblum?
Yeah.
John DeCramer?
Yes.
Russ Labatt?
Yes.
Tim Lozinski?
Yes.
And the motion does pass. So then John and Steve, you two can get together and kind of sort out who has time available and which of you are going to do that. So
I'll give Councilman Meister rights of first refusal.
okay. So we'll move then to agenda item number 16. Agenda item number 16 is the James Avenue Camden Drive reconstruction project. The action to consider would be the resolution that would approve the plans and specifications and ordering the advertisement for the bids. Once again, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. We've got this project ready to go. The team has worked very hard to get our plans and specifications completed early in the year. It's still January and we're ready to advertise, and we're in a really great place. As we know, this is a complete street reconstruction of James Avenue and utility replacement and Camden Drive from James up to 4th Street. As part of the project, we'll take storm sewer pipe replacement all the way out across the golf course to the river. And that'll be a significant pipe upsizing and drainage improvement for a very large drainage area. Also not written in there, but another piece that we've added into the project, a small piece, is building a slight berm on the south end of the snow dump site out by the fairgrounds property and north of the golf course, and a small tile extension with the intentions being to do our best to manage our snow melt in the spring and be a good neighbor to the golf course. With some of the spoils that come off of the project site, we're hoping the contractor can truck them over there and create a small, very small berm to sort of help mitigate the problem without trapping too much water and creating a burden for the airport. So we're ready to go with the project. Project estimates $1.2 million with engineering and contingency worked in. The project will be assessed following our most current special assessment policy. Staff would recommend that the council approve the plans and specs and ordering the advertisement for bids.
Okay. Any questions for Jason?
Jason, just a question. Your plan is still to narrow the street and to put, if my memory serves me correctly, a 5-foot sidewalk right next to the curb on James?
The plan is to narrow the street from somewhere around 39 and a half feet, 40 feet wide, curb to curb, to 36. And there's existing sidewalk that's 4.5 or 5 feet wide right behind the curb. We would propose 7 feet wide right behind the curb. So that narrowing of the street goes to the sidewalk to give a little more room in there. We don't have space to get a bigger boulevard in without taking out a lot of mature trees. So we figure the next best thing is just create a little more room in there for the pedestrians.
And if I remember correctly, Jason, the wider sidewalk is a place for the city to dump snow without forcing the residents to move that snow.
That's part of it. We don't like to leave anybody with a 2 or 3 foot boulevard space if we can help it. So we figure we just pave it and we make that all widened walk. And in the wintertime, the residents, if they can get a 4 foot passable area, that's really the expectation.
And I think the reason why we're looking at the 36-foot streets is cost, plain and simple. You know, the taxpayers don't want the levy going up, and shrinking streets makes that happen. If we keep building 40-foot streets, we're going to have to increase our levy more than what we did this year.
I think the other thing to say about this project, as well as a number of the other projects that we've done over the past number of years, is one of the real benefits of this project is improving the stormwater management. And, you know, that's been a long-term goal all over town. And this is probably one of the last neighborhoods that will see the benefit of the, you know, improved stormwater management, so that there isn't the risk of the infiltration, overloading of some of our existing infrastructure that's in the ground, and some of the ponding of the water that happens in our extremely heavy rain events. Other input, other discussion?
Just,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
John and then Craig.
okay, just confirming, Jason, this will be our first online bidding, is that correct? Are we set up all set?
This project will actually be the second, the North First Street project. We'll
Okay.
receive bids on that first. This one will be 2 weeks behind that, but this one will be electronic bids only as well. That's correct.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
And now Craig.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Jason for acknowledging that part of this project is also solving a problem that the last couple winters was fairly significant for the golf course. I don't know the whole numbers, but it's the whole directly north of the driving range, where that would flood out a lot in the spring during snow melt because of our snow pile. And having that berm and extended tile remedy hopefully will really help that. And I appreciate the fact that you both included that and recognized it. So thank you for that.
Yes, if I may, that was something we worked on with a few meetings with the golf course. They identified that as a pretty major concern. We're sympathetic to that, and we think it's something we can cost effectively address with this project. We're sensitive to say that we're going to solve the problem because we're building a very low level berm, but we're trying to help do a small improvement. We can see how it goes, and we can see if we need to make any adjustments after that. But it's a good first step. We still need to work out getting a signed easement from the golf course, but we feel like we're right there. I just need to reach out to them again this week and early next week and get this wrapped up. We think that we've satisfied their concerns.
Thank you.
Any other input from the council? If not, you have the recommendation. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to proceed.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Jim, to approve the resolution for the plans and specifications and ordering the advertisement for bids on this project. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns?
Yes?
Craig Schaefer?
Yes.
Steve Meister?
Yes.
Don Edblum?
Yes.
John DeCramer?
Yes.
Russ Labatt?
No,
Jim Lozinski?
Yes.
And the motion passes. Agenda item number 17, the Lion Street reconfiguration of the lanes from Trunk Highway 23 to Adobe Road. Once again, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. In 2022, the city plans to complete an enhanced pedestrian crossing project right there, identified at that pedestrian crossing on the screen at Adobe Road. The project will incorporate new school zone signage, radar speed zone signage, and RRFB push button crossing, and a pedestrian refuge island. You can see that on the drawing there. That's a grant funded project for 2022 that we're working on getting everything put into place. To get ready for that project and specifically prepare to put that median in the center, We'd like the council to consider a 3-lane striping configuration on Lion Street from Adobe here, as you see, then going east all the way out to Highway 23. The roadway has got adequate width, and we think that this is actually a pretty good fit for this area to provide a left turn lane through here. To accommodate it and keep the bike trails on the street between Jewett and Adobe, we do need to remove parking on both sides of the street. So that's what you see there. The white stripes indicate bike lanes, painted on-street bike lanes between the curb and the white line, not a parking lane. So we propose to do that in 2021 in front of our project in 2022 for the push button and school enhancement signage project. Negative to the project is those 2 homes just west of Adobe do lose parking directly in front of their house, but there are options on Adobe Road and just to the west on Lion where parking will still be allowed when the striping goes back to 2-lane to the west. So we did bring this to PAT and got some input. PAT generally was in favor of this and motioned to recommend it to council. So staff would just like council's recommendation to go forward with this.
Okay, thank you, Jason. We'll open up for any input or questions.
Jason,
Mr. Mayor?
oh, go ahead, Steve.
So can you guys go back to that picture, Kyle? Yeah. So here's my question, and we're looking at again, taking the bike lanes and putting them on the road, putting those 3 lanes in there. Now, just curious, and I want everybody's input here, especially Mayor Burns, as I know he's an avid cyclist too. I bike that road an awful lot. This is a child thing because there's going to be kids going to the school there. Does it make better sense to force the kids up onto the sidewalk and we make the sidewalk part of the bike trail system on that, what would that be, the south side there, because that's Independence Park, and leave the road as it is, or do we do what Jason recommends? I mean, that would be the question. I don't know what the cost difference would be. Jason, you could probably opine on that, but from a bicycle and a bicycle friendly community, you know, how much more difficult would it be to widen that sidewalk out a little bit in the parking area? You know, it's in the park, not the parking area, but it's a public park, and make it a bike trail, part of the bike trail system. Just curious.
So I'll weigh in on that, Steve, first. And that is actually a question that I had. There's a portion that's in that lighter shade that where the sidewalk does not exist right now. So Jason, that would be a future project. Yeah, right there.
That was included with the 2022 grant application with the RRFB project. It was not in the original application. They had some leftover dollars in the grant program and they asked if we had a use for it, and we sure did right there to bring folks into the park along that path.
Well, I think especially the stretch from where the sidewalk ends right now, right across the street from Adobe up to the access to Independence Park, you know, that's a gap that really makes sense to fill in. That sidewalk right now, I believe, Jason, is 4 feet, and right
Yes.
now does have you know, because it's in a park and because it's in a major kind of walking area, because of the park, there's a lot of walkers that are on there too. So on Steve's concern that, you know, 4 foot is not adequate for both walkers and bicyclists, so it would really need to be turned into a bike path, which would be more like, Jason, what would it be, 8 foot? Or I mean, it would be certainly wider, and there would need to be some kind of a separation or markings or signage, you know, so that both the walkers and the bicyclists could be on it safely.
8 to 10 feet wide, and if the council was looking to put that in along Independence Park on the south side of Lion, across all of the park's property, you know, you're probably talking about $200,000. The reason staff is proposing this what you're seeing here today is it's a lower cost answer, and it matches what you have today. Today you've got the painted on street trails, so we're giving that back. But if the council wanted to identify funds, we could certainly try to pencil in trail expansion here. But I would point out that the trail in Independence Park itself is in pretty heavy need of repair to the tune of many hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it might be something we wish to look at as well before we spend to add to the system. But we would certainly be, if dollars are identified, we can certainly work that out. That would just be a council decision.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I think a question that I have, if we took the bike paths off of the road, but left the center turn lanes in there, that still doesn't leave enough lane width to actually allow street parking, correct?
It would be tight. We would have to look at whether we could accommodate it. We could certainly accommodate on one side. Two would be a little tight. I would have to check. Jesse Dean's on the call, Assistant City Engineer. He worked on this. Do you recall how much width we had in the bike lane, Jesse? If there's enough room for parking on both sides?
The lanes would be incredibly narrow, as well as the bike lane. You'd be looking at maybe 10.5-foot lanes and maybe 5 feet, 6 feet of bike lane.
So we probably wouldn't recommend that. I think you'd have parking on one side.
Right, because it's a part of this was to work to facilitate the center turn lane and the sanctuary area there in the crosswalk, correct?
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I like Steve's idea. I just don't think we have it in, I like your idea, Steve. I just don't think we have it in the budget, but I would like to see it when we redo the paths in Independence Park, that we redo this one to a walking trail. This is actually a sidewalk I use often. Yes, I do walk, guys. So it is one that's used. The only question I had, and we talked about by removing the parking from the street, Jason, is communicating with the school on using their parking lot at times, because we are eliminating a lot of street parking there. What was that communication ever done with the school?
Thanks for bringing that up. That was brought up at PIT. I have not reached out yet. I do not see much of a problem with that, but I will reach out to the school district and have some communication with them about that.
Yeah. And then the other thing I want to bring up is I know Mr. Sprick down on the end with his funeral home. Nobody's communicated with him. And I know he uses this street for parking too when he has larger funerals. Just someone should be in communication with him, so he can have something worked out in the future when this happens, so he's not caught off guard.
I think what we could do as city staff, if it's desired by the council, we could send out a letter to all the adjacent property owners indicating, show the layout and indicating what's happening, and giving them some sort of idea of the anticipated timeline, just so they're not caught off guard when it happens.
I don't like to add extra expense, but I think that would be good. I think the main business would be the funeral home. And other people may use, I don't know if the church uses street parking or not, but so I think they're aware of what's going on.
And John?
Just comment on that, and then back on a separate question. Just saying, mostly what I've seen parking is on Jewett Street for the funeral home, or some additional in the church parking lot that's across the street from there. But my question was going back on the 2 residents that are affected with no parking in front of their lots. Have they been notified?
We have not reached out to them at this point in time. We could reach out to them with the communication as well, when we reach out to everyone along the corridor.
Yeah, I would like to see that everyone be notified of that and have a chance to express some input on this.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Steve.
I concur with Councilman Kramer's recommendation and Councilmember Lazinski. When we're going to do this and we're going to change something, I used to drive down that road all the time, and there's not really a ton of street parking on that road. But anytime you are going to make an impact like that, It's really important to reach out and talk to the people who are affected even before we start discussing it. So I think it's a good idea. Certainly, Jason, please reach out and talk to these people, and having the public hearing on that from their standpoint would be completely appropriate. It may not change our decision, but it's appropriate because, especially Sprick's Funeral Home, we impact a business, and that is not our job, is to adversely impact business. So thank you.
Is it the, if I may, Mayor, is it the desire of the council to have staff reach out and ask for input and then come back to the council at a later date with this item? And I suppose that it'd be similar to Southview. We would do the same on Southview, where a few months ago we brought that forward for a 3-lane striping configuration. Is that what I'm hearing?
So in that case, the suggestion about getting input or informing the neighbors, I think your suggestion is good, that it would make sense for that to happen before the council takes the action, and then informing them after the fact. So if that is the direction of the council, it probably would be appropriate to just table this until a future meeting, perhaps the next regular council meeting.
So I would make that motion to table.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Jason,
I just have a question for Jason. Jason, to the south of the funeral home on Lion Street, in reference to Councilman DeCramer, when Hamilton has a lot of funerals, is there going to be parking allowed on Lion Street adjacent to the funeral home? To the south of the funeral home? I'd call it south.
We can review that. At this point in time, we weren't discussing that. We were talking about no on-street parking on Lion from 23 to Adobe, but we can review if there's opportunity between Jewett and Highway 23, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, that's what, because again, it doesn't happen that often, but I would hate to have people park there and get a ticket or whatever. Maybe they wouldn't get a ticket, but I think, again, communication not only with the homeowners, but with the Hamilton Funeral Home. Thank you, Jason.
Oh. And Jason, I visited with Dave Sprick about this already at the funeral home, and you're correct. John said very seldom does he use it. He just wants to be aware of it so he can let people know. He says the only funeral that would be big enough would be Schaefer's, where people would use it. But for the most part, people don't park there, but I just want him aware of what's going on.
There'd be enough room for 2 cars, Jim.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Jason, you're okay with tabling this until?
Yes, I think we have time.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, Your Honor, I would just like to come to the defense of my esteemed councilmember Schaefer.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Don Edblum,
Yeah.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes.
Tim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion passes. Okay, agenda item number 18, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Betterments Project Update. Jason, you can provide an update on this as well as your recommendation. And as you do this, thank you to both yourself and Jesse from your staff on, the kind of extensive networking and some negotiation with the Corps of Engineers. It's been a few years, and I know you have both put a lot of thought and time into this. So thank you. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. Early in 2019, we brought forward 6 different locations along the flood control project where there was some slope failure occurring. This was following high water events in summer 2018 and spring 2019. In particular, sites 1 and 2, 2 being the worst, are quite concerning. Site 2, the city staff has actually put in some temporary riprap to kind of hold that together, where there's erosion into the levee prism occurring right now. So very significant damage to the system there, but nothing out of control or not manageable, but just something we need to address. So we started working with the Corps of Engineers, utilizing a federal assistance program called Public Law 8499. Under the Public Law 8499, if there's flood damage from a high water event to a federal project that's in good standing, meaning you follow through on your inspections and you take care of your system, you're eligible for some assistance. So when we started the process back then, we were under the impression that these 4 sites on here that you see, sites 1, 2, 3, and 6 on the other side of town, we were under the impression that each one of those sites were going to be covered partially by federal dollars and partially by city dollars for what we call betterments, where we were going to extend some riprap and armoring. Since that time of coming in forward to the council in September of 2019 and entering into an agreement with a cost participation of just under $150,000 and establishing that as our baseline and our estimate, the Corps has since got their plans completed and reached out to us with a final estimate. And that estimate was $440,000 of city cost participation. So we were quite surprised with that number. So we, in discussion with the Corps of Engineers, we determined that they were holding the city responsible for sites 1, 3, and 6 in their entirety, while the Corps paid for site number 2 in its entirety. City staff held a few more conversations after that with the Corps of Engineers, and since that time, they've agreed to pay entirely for sites 1 and 2, with the city paying entirely for sites 3 and 6. So what we're here today to talk to the council about is just getting your buy-in and support to have staff advise the Corps of Engineers to bid sites 3 and 6 as bid alternates in the project. So the Corps of Engineers would pay for sites 1 and 2 and bid those as the base bid, and they'll get done at their cost entirely. And the city will have the option and opportunity to review the prices submitted for sites 3 and 6. And at that time, we can come back to the council with recommendation for whether we should do one of the sites, 2 of the sites, or none of them. So the fiscal impact of this is that we may spend the $150,000 that we've already given the Corps, or more, depending on what the costs are, or we might spend $0. It depends on what the council wishes to do when we come back with the bids. So there's a lot of information here, some of it probably confusing. If there's any questions, I can answer them, but today staff would advise that we bid the other 2 sites as alternates to see what the prices are, and then we can see what our options are on the table, and we can talk about it at a later date.
Thank you, Jason. And I think the good news here is that sites 1 and 2, which are the most threatening, they're the upstream portions. They're where the water is flowing the fastest. That the Corps will pay for those entirely. So that's good. And I like your recommendation that the downstream portions, the other portions, that see what it's going to cost and then make a decision whether it's within the amount that has been already turned over to the Corps or not. So
yes, Mayor, sites 1 and 2 are really concerning to us. So we're ecstatic that the Corps of Engineers is going to pay for them in their entirety. We were really surprised that when they came back to us and said we will in fact pay for site number 1 after conversation. That was really good news.
The other clarification on that, and I know we discussed this earlier, is we would anticipate that this construction project will destroy the bike trail, but as part of the project, the Corps will completely replace and repair and replace what they've damaged. Then
I believe that to be true. Jesse, can you confirm that?
I would have to look at their plans, but I think that would be a requirement of the easement.
I remember seeing it in there, so I'm pretty sure that that's the case, and we will make sure it's the case.
Please do.
Other input or questions for Jason?
Jason, if you can forward to page 2, Kyle. No, go back to page 2. It says, okay, the next page. Because it says the benefit of waiting is that there may be another high water event that clearly causes significant damage to the project, and these sites may be eligible for federal cost participation at that time. If we choose not to do it 3 and 6 at this time, and then something happens 5 years from now, can the Corps come back to us and say, you chose not to do it when we told you to do it 5 years ago and you didn't do it? I mean, could they hold our, pardon my terminology, our feet to the water, or our head to the water, and say, you didn't do it, so we're not going to pay for it anyway?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Councilman. Yes, probably. That's the concern, and that's why we think it's prudent that we at least see what these bids come in at, and we can have a discussion, because it is entirely possible that slowly the project erodes away and the Corps of Engineers starts putting that into our inspection report. Now it's our burden to fix it as it's slowly eroding away, and that'll be at our cost. That's part of maintaining and operating your system. So that could happen. It also could happen that it'd be eligible to be covered. It all depends on who's working in the office at that time. Do they remember what we talked about today? Did they take good notes? And how do they keep score on it? It's really variable, and that's why we just think it's best that we see what the numbers are and then talk about it.
Thank you, Jason.
And John.
Just clarification, Jason, when you ask for the alternate bids, it's both 3 and 6 are separate alternates. So we could choose 3 and not 6, or reverse that, or whatever. Is that correct?
That's
okay,
correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Jason, if I may, I did double check. It does call it out in the plans that they do have a small call out for repair the trail for the detail.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Steve.
So Jason, when my question would be, when what you just said about if they remember talking, and it depends on who's in the office, this is big bureaucracy. And so when we are negotiating with them, do we have them jot down their notes and their proposals to us in the first place, and have somebody who's in power and charge sign them, so that if something comes back where they said, well, we don't remember saying that, we can whip out the piece of paper that says, well, I don't know whose signature this is, but it's on United States Army Corps of Engineers letterhead with a United States Army Corps of Engineer official signing it, so you're responsible.
I understand where you're coming from. I think that we're just really ecstatic that they're taking on the cost coverage of sites 1 and 2 in their entirety. The way I thought the law read, that seemed like they didn't have to do that. It seems like we could have been held responsible for some of that betterments, because they're doing a lot of extra work there. So we're careful how much we push the buttons there. We think that they're doing us a great service by restoring our project in a manner that will make it last, and they're doing it all on their dime. So that's a very good thing. I think with any public law like this, it can be gray sometimes how you interpret certain things, and this is one of those situations. And this group and this team is interpreting it in a way that's really beneficial to us, I believe.
And Jason, we'd be looking at a summer project then, a 2021 project.
Yes, spring, summer, likely summer. That is what we're being told now. They have the project pretty well in hand and ready to go. They've requested funds through their process. It's just all about how quickly they can get funds to start their bid process.
Any other questions for Jason? If not, what are the wishes of the council on this proposal?
I'll make a motion to authorize the city staff to advise ASACE officials to bid sites 3 and 6 as alternates.
I'll second that.
Motion by John, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
Just one last question for Jason. Jason, the estimates for 3 and 6 combined are about $210,000. We've already paid 148. So if we choose to go ahead with those two, if the bids come back favorable, our added expense might only be about $60-some thousand. Is that correct?
Yes, if bid costs come in on estimate, we would have to pay them an additional $60,000 to complete the work. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Don Edblum,
Yeah.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion passes. Agenda item number 19, consider the approval to request proposals for the Marshall Aquatic Center design, architectural, engineering services. I'll start with Sharon, and I believe Scott Vandermillen is on the line too. So
Should be.
Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and Council, myself and staff are bringing forward a request for the council to consider architectural engineering services to help us guide us in the next steps with the community pool Marshall Aquatic Center. As most of us are aware, in 2019, there was a study commissioned and released by the 292 Design Group that provided recommendations on facility improvements. We do have a short presentation to just cover with all of you to refresh our memory on what the issues are with the pool. And let me also just say that one of the reasons we want to bring this forward, we really feel that if the City Council would like to move forward, we need professional expertise to guide us through the next steps. We know from past projects that, you know, each phase really has decision points for the council. So if the council does approve a request for proposals, then there would be another action item to actually hire the firm. They would then begin work on design. There would be more action on letting it out for bid, and then also accepting that bid. So multiple decision points yet in the future. And then let me also add financing, funding. I know that will be a very large question, not only for the council, but you may get feedback from your constituents in the community. And what likely we will do here, hopefully in February, just talking with our Administrative Services Director, Annette Storm, is we do want to have a work session to talk about all things finance, our debt reduction schedule, liquor store debt, current, City Hall, and then, of course, some different considerations for the pool. We anticipate that one of the recommendations going forward for the community pool in terms of financing would be that a major portion of that funding would come through a general obligation bond, which is different than a capital bond that we did for City Hall, and that we would like to get support of the community. In that support of the community, we would also like to seek out donation mechanisms and revenue streams identified, and there's a small portion of this RFP that mentions that as well. We think there's capacity to achieve some of that as in addition to the general obligation. But tonight, consideration on request for proposals for an architectural engineering firm. And Kyle, if you want to just go to the next slide, and then I do want to add our Community Services Division Director, Scott Vandermillen, is going to help me co-present this short presentation. And we also have in the room here with us Park Superintendent Preston Stensrud, who I know has been advocating for a long time for something to be done, not only because of the study, just on a day-to-day operational level. it has been challenging for him and his staff in terms of what they have to do to keep the pool operational. So just a little bit on community development. The city of Marshall has always done a lot in terms of projects, not only just the city, but other community organizations. And I just want to cover a few of those as it relates to the pool. Obviously, in terms of timing, why are we bringing this forward now? We know that we are nearing the end of our City Hall renovation, with the anticipated completion date indicated by the construction manager the first week in May. And of course, we'll take some time to officially move in, but we are anticipating a completion of the City Hall project. Next slide. One other thing we want to add, we know that another large project for the community has been Southview Elementary. And in addition, their progress on construction has been moving along quite well. We think the community pool and the elementary school construction lends well to what we want for quality of life in the city of Marshall. And then maybe not directly related, but I did want to throw this in there because this will be a major project for the city, even though it is a Department of Transportation project, which is Highway 19 College Drive reconstruction. As you can see on the map, it starts near the entrance of our aquatic center. And we believe and anticipate and hope that the Highway 19 College Drive reconstruction will really add a good perception of the city of Marshall. And we hope that the aquatic center can lend to that as well. So now I'm going to turn this over to our Community Services Director, Scott Vandermillen, for the additional background on this pool project.
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Sharon indicated earlier, in early 2019, the city requested professional assistance in evaluating the existing outdoor aquatic center, along with studying the factors involved in a possible replacement. Then in July of 2019, 292 Design Group, which is housed out of Minneapolis, presented their findings to council. Here you see an aerial view of the current facility at Legion Park. Over 50 years old, again, as Sharon indicated. It's the second oldest outdoor facility in the state of Minnesota. Silver Lake's facility was built in 1959, and ours was shortly thereafter. So here's a snapshot of those findings that 292 Design presented. As you can see, the summary indicates what we anticipated from a 50-year-old facility. So a few months after the 292 Design Group's findings were presented, staff created and submitted an 11-question online survey to almost 800 households that had accessed our facility during the summers of 2018 and 2019. We received just over 300 responses from that survey, which was an outstanding return. And again, we've just created a summary of those findings for you to see there. In the concept plan that 292 created, based on the recommendations from our Aquatic Center Study Committee, you'll notice the inclusion of a splash pad, relocation of both the concessions area and mechanical building. And there would also be extensive changes within the bathhouse, which Preston will review with you in a few more slides. The feedback given to the 292 Design Group from both our study committee and the online survey were unanimous in 3 areas, which we'll highlight in the next 3 slides here. First, a lap pool, which in this design would include 4 75-yard swimming lanes, a diving area with both a 1 and a 3-meter diving board, and an ADA ramp entry. A leisure pool would include zero depth entry and interactive water features, shade structures, a slide, and a plunge pool along with a climbing wall. A leisure pool includes areas for both young children and their families. And here is simply an additional visual that gives you another look at what the water features could provide and look like in a new facility. And then finally, of those three, a splash pad. So this is a dry area that has no standing water. It includes shade structures and interactive play features that spray, dump, or shoot water. The water is immediately drained from the surface. Splash pads are extremely popular and appropriate for all ages, including toddlers. What we found very interesting from both our study committee and the online survey was that for a community that doesn't currently have a splash pad like ours, aside from the zero depth entry and a water slide, a splash pad was by far the next requested amenity that the community wanted. So Preston, I'm going to turn this over to you to talk about the bathhouse and some other relocation features.
Thanks, Scott. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This slide here focuses strictly on the bathhouse features. And at the end of the pool season in 2019, we did do a tour of the facility. I'm not sure which council members were able to attend, but we have very significant deficiencies from the entrance and appeal of the building to ADA, to just the flow of from check-in to going to the locker rooms and splitting up families, to the locker rooms themselves, having no privacy, no doors on stalls, not even rooms to put doors on stalls. That whole feel of just from your entrance to get out to the actual water area. This is a concept that would move so that you would check in and go directly through the building and go straight out to the water. There'd be family changing rooms as well as a men's and women's locker room, shower area. And then instead of the lifeguards being housed in the center of the building, their like break area and stuff like that would be off kind of behind the concession stand, which as you're looking at the screen would be on the left side. Those two rooms would more be kind of like offices or some privacy versus being right exposed to the public in the front. Many pools that I've went to, the flow is very similar to this, and it's just a lot more welcoming instead of going through so many steps to get up to the door, check in, and then if you're going with, maybe a young daughter and I'm a male, it really gets tough to send them through the women's locker room and you go through the men's or vice versa. So it just gets to be real challenging and not very family oriented or friendly. So this is just a simple concept. There's obviously changes that could be done also.
Preston, would you want to speak to the relocation of the mechanical room and concessions area?
Sure. So that the concession area on this one is the far left. And then there's that dashed line is kind of like a fenced in area. What we found now, if you guys are familiar, you go like on break areas, you got to go back out through the locker rooms, out and around the front of the building, and then go to the concessions area. That's not concession friendly at all. We would propose you'd still have a separate area, but you could go right from the pool deck into that gated or fenced area, whatever it ends up being, go right to the concession stand versus all the way back through the locker rooms and such. The mechanical building, you can't see on this slide. It was a ways back, but on the bottom of the screen, it would be where all the chlorine and boilers and acid and stuff like that would be kept away from the users. Since those chemicals are literally mixing in line, there's some potential for hazard if something would go wrong. This would kind of eliminate all of our storage of hazardous materials to be away from the building itself. And it'd also be ease of unloading. Like now when our chemical company brings the chlorine, we get several pallets at a time. We have to hand unload each bucket and carry it into the building. This would be a design where you could back right up and just go right in. So from a user and maintenance side, it'd be much more efficient.
Thank you.
Thanks, Preston. So here you can see the cost estimates that were presented at the time of the assessment. And just a reminder that these costs were created and estimated from the assumption of demolition and rebuilding at the existing location. So Kyle, you can keep that up there if you want. Those are just some additional visuals at the end there, but we'd welcome any questions from the council for either myself, Preston, or Sharon.
Thank you, Scott. Sharon, anything you wanted to conclude with?
I just want to add, in terms of in your packet was the request for proposal. I did this afternoon. I sent out a brief revision on adding cost to the proposal and a breakout of each request for the cost. But just some key dates and a couple key factors in there. We are, if approved tonight, we would be requesting that the proposals be received by March 4th. We would have a selection committee, again, base it on some of the selection factors that we included in the RFP and bring it back to the city council for a decision on March 23rd. One important factor I think that's key in this proposal is we did indicate that we do want to have some community feedback, and we did indicate in the proposal if we could have one or more public sessions, and we'll have to see how we conduct that with COVID. But Scott knows full well, we anticipated actually doing this April of last year. But with COVID, we delayed public feedback. And I also want to point out that, Scott's comment about, 800 surveys that were sent out and the response rate that he got, we do have really, really good data. But just to ensure that we get really good community feedback, we want to open it up to a broader base in addition. So that is included with this RFP as well. That's all I had to add on that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Preston. The open up for any questions the council has either about the project as described or the request to entertain proposals for design, architecture, engineering to be solicited to come back at a meeting in March for additional consideration. Open up for any input.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Jim.
Actually, Sharon and I were talking about the pool this morning. And I remember this pool when I was a wee little kid, so it is really, really old. And I guess what Preston and I have chatted is we need to make a decision as a council, as a community, is do we want a pool or don't we want a pool? Chatting with Preston, we could come up this spring and this pool has a heaved floor and we don't have a pool anymore. It is to the point we need to do something. It is not at all ADA compliant. It is not at all, when you say nice pools, Pipestone's pool is a lot nicer than ours and it's new. And I believe Tracy has a new pool and I'm not necessarily on gung-ho to spend $8 to $9 million. But we as a community need to make a decision of either we're going to do this or we're not. I know Preston brings up he loses 12 to 15,000 gallons of water a day. I would guess maybe 1,000 that's evaporation. The rest is leaking. Obviously, it's leaking underneath, which is undermining the pool. So it is time that we make a decision and we move forward with it. I do like the design. I know that Councilmember Labatt wants to look at an indoor-outdoor pool. I think that cost would be north of 25 million. We have indoor pools at the Y. We have an indoor pool at the college. We do have indoor pools yet. And we want to look at cost. And I think this is a cost-effective way to try and solve this problem. And we want to keep young families in town. We need to give them amenities or they're not going to stay.
Thank you, Jim. Other input from the council?
I'd just like
John.
to say, Jim, I can do you one better. I remember taking lessons and going through that bathhouse. So I think that one probably tops yours.
You're a lot older, John, so that had to be back like the Civil War or so.
Not quite that.
I didn't know they had swimming that far back.
Oh yeah, it goes back a ways. I would like to just say that in the analysis, I think it would be good to address the issue of if we can extend the time period or how many months this can be open, because it is a fairly major expenditure. And, if we can look at options, not necessarily, specifically an enclosed structure, but just to address, okay, we have a pool, would it be feasible to at least enclose it to extend the year? I think I'd like to see that at least talked about in the proposal or whatever, and somewhat addressed. It's maybe not quite as far, or maybe it is as far as what Councilman Labatt would like to see, but this is a fairly major expenditure, and just having it available for 3 months, maybe 4 months out of the year is a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, I think there's also, John, probably a discussion that will need to happen concurrently is on the staffing and scheduling, and even to the point, I know there's discussion this last year of, can we extend the season through Labor Day? And some of that's impacted by available labor because some of the staff are returning to college. But, certainly that's many years, that's some of the warmest time of the year and kind of the last gasp of summer before the young people return to school in a normal situation. So in how that gets staffed, and are there opportunities for collaboration with other organizations? I think that's a concurrent discussion along with the physical facility that we're talking about tonight. So
yes.
Mr. Mayor, in reference to my fellow council members' comments, if I remember correctly, back a couple of years ago when this was first brought forward, I think some of us council members asked a couple of things to explore the possibilities of a partnership with the YMCA and or the college. I think the YMCA partnership has been explored somewhat. We can't add on to that facility, or they can't add on because of the geothermal. My question is, have we explored the partnership with the university? And my other comment is in reference to Councilman Lazinski. At that time, back a couple of years ago, when we first started talking about this, the people that I ran into, constituents, whether they be in my ward or just residents of the community, I made reference to what Councilman DeCreamer said. I said, would you like to spend $8 million for 3 months out of the year, or would you like to spend, and I just pulled a number out of the sky, $16 million that you could use a facility 12 months out of the year. The majority of responses was, let's do the 12 months. Let's do the 16 million. If we're going to spend 8, let's spend 16. So that's telling me the residents want to at least look at maybe doing an indoor facility. I agree with the mayor and Councilman DeCreamer. Now is an opportunity to take a look at it. And I think that we also have to take a look at, a partnership with the university. That pool, they just started a women's swimming program, so maybe it's not available. But I know that in the summertime when it's 80 degrees, you don't want to go out inside swimming out at the college, and it's not convenient for the kids to ride their bikes, and a lot of negative things as well. But I think we've formed very valuable, beneficial partnerships with the university, with the high school for the use of athletic facilities. I think we at least need to ask the question if we haven't asked it. And I think, and again, I go back to, I would like to see just a ballpark figure what that indoor facility might cost. If it's going to be 16 or it's going to be 30. We don't know that at this point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sharon, you had,
I did inquire with SMSU on a partnership, and I did not get a response. And maybe I wasn't talking to the right person. I'm not sure. The only thing I will add is I think part of this RFP is a pre-designed schematic and public input. I think if the council wants the direction to explore options, indoor, outdoor, venue, whatever it may be, obviously, and we've seen this with City Hall, we can direct them to do that. So the RFP doesn't pigeonhole the architect or the engineering firm into the 292 design or their projected thoughts on what it should look like.
and I'd also add, there's been quite a bit of research and discussion and communication with the YMCA. And as Councilmember Labatt said, because of the orientation of their existing pool and the location of the geothermal system, as well as the how the pool is accessed by members and not non-members, that's logistically it just wasn't feasible to go down that road any farther. Other input? If not, you have the request, and the request is to go out for proposals for design, architectural, and engineering services to come back in early March for consideration. I would entertain a motion.
Move to
For the sake
approve.
of discussion, I'll second that motion.
Was that Steve made the motion?
Jim, or did you make a motion, Steve? Okay.
I did make the motion.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
So, Mr. Mayor, we've put a lot of time on this on the Community Services Board, and I appreciate the ideas of an indoor-outdoor pool. But again, we don't want to compete with anybody. The Y has a pool. Southwest Minnesota State has a pool. America Inn has an indoor pool that they use. There's a lot of places. However, the Y is probably the most appropriate one because they can be accessible by all people in Marshall. They have a lot of scholarships that they give away. If we were to use that, or if we were to do something with an indoor-outdoor design, we would be competing with some people. And if you can do a collaborative issue, you're really not competing. But again, the Y is kind of stuck unless they want to help fund it. And I think they're doing a capital campaign looking to expand their place. SMSU, Sharon's reached out. That gets touchy because now you're into another level of bureaucracy with Minskew. So I think that we need to trust what the Community Services Board has done. And Scott has done a wonderful job with that board and led us, and lots of surveys and lots of research. And I would speak in favor of just going forward with the request for proposals with this. We build this for our people. And if our people like it, others will come and say, wow, what a great facility you have. And more people will come and help support Marshall. So that is all.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any other discussion on the motion?
Yes, Steve, to kind of jump on your idea, and this goes to Preston and Scott, is maybe we work out with something with the Y where folks can buy a year-long pass to both pools. And I know it takes some paperwork and some logistics. So they have access to both pools with one cost and one pass. I don't know how that would work, but then we have the outdoor pool, and then they have access to the indoor pool in the winter to utilize the Y's pool and maybe get more people utilizing the Y. And then, kind of the best of both worlds. And I agree with you. We have a plethora of indoor pools in Marshall, not only American Inn. All the hotels have indoor pools that they do let people use them for a small cost in the winter too.
Thank you, Jim. Other discussion on the motion? If not, Kyle will move us to a vote on the motion on the table.
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Don Edblum,
Yeah.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
No.
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion passes. It brings us to agenda item number 20, council member board liaison reports from my commissions. The Southwest Regional Development Commission had their monthly meeting this past Thursday. Quite a bit of discussion about regional economic development, competitiveness, especially as it relates to communities that are within 60 miles of another state, and what strategies can be used. And there's continuing discussion following up on that with the communities of Worthington, Laverne, Pipestone, and Marshall. The SRDC revolving loan funds also continue to be very active and meet very often, at this point bi-weekly. The Fire Relief Association has their quarterly meeting this 1 week from tonight. With that, we'll move then to Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything on the committees to report. Thank you.
Okay, Steve.
The EDA did meet, but I was stuck with the Southwest Public Health and Human Services preparation for a vaccine exercise, which I will talk about later.
And Don.
The Planning Commission met and we've taken care of that item that we covered, and I've not had a meeting notice from the public housing. So that is all, sir.
Okay, thank you, Don. John?
EDA, as mentioned, did meet. We did appoint Doris Huber as secretary. She was sharing her services between EDA and assessing office, and appreciate the help and the background that she brings to the EDA. MMU also met. Two main items discussion were a handle was an amendment to the resolution adopting a distribution of 2020 refund. There was a refund of approximately $2 million that MRES returned to the customers, and they've got a system in place on how that will equally go out, or fairly, I should say, as fairly as possible, go out to all the customers. And then they too had some issues with some change orders on the water plant softening and enhancement project, primarily due to finding some buried scrap iron and materials in the area where they're trying to dig through. So they had to take and clean that out and put in some fresh. So a few surprises that were underground that nobody knew about. That's about it.
Okay, thank you, John. Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only committee that I met or had met was CVB, and probably Councilman Meister won't like this, but the Craft Beer Festival has been postponed for May. The breweries are not traveling, so that was a disappointment, but the understandable with COVID. The ice, as we all know, and we probably read in the paper, and the mayor dropped, I think, the first puck last Thursday or Friday. Ice Dogs were in town, and they will hopefully be in town maybe through the month of May, depending on the schedule and things like that. So CVB is encouraging people to go and take a look at that. Also enclosed with the council packet is the unaudited financial statement for CVB. And if you wanted to take a look at that, they actually ended up in a much better position, even with reduced revenues. They did a good job of reducing expenses. So overall, CVB had a good year. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Jim?
Mine did not meet.
Okay, we'll move then to council member individual items. Jim, let's start on your end.
Obviously, I always start with City Hall because that's a big project going on. Deb Gow did a wonderful job with the report. For those who read the paper on Saturday, nice article, explained a lot. We're on budget and on time yet. I mean, we have a lot at 6.9 million, and net, you're on the line if I'm wrong, but I believe we have a lot at we spent 6.9 and the budget 7.2. Yes, furniture still has to come out of there, but we are on track to come in on budget, and like I said, on time. And you can see the niche panels going on, and the brick is going on, so that is going well. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, at times we as council members get asked by businesses or adults, or one of the cases would be what we're doing with the city and how we're spending money and what project we're working on. And recently I was asked by Wayne Seahusen to go and speak to the Weeblos #2 Den Pack 238 Boys and Girls Scout meeting. And I did that last evening. I just wanted to give a shout out a little bit because I was very impressed by the questions these scouts asked about what we as council members do as elected officials. They asked about our streets. They asked about the library. They asked about recreational facilities. These scouts had a earning to what they wanted to know more and eager to learn more about city government. They all came prepared for questions. And in fact, there was a couple of questions that I didn't have answers to, believe it or not. So tonight I'd like to give a shout out and thanks to all those members of PAC 238, and especially the patrol leaders, Nathan Larson, Emily Lesnetsky, and also to Wayne Seahusen for inviting me to their meeting last night. I told them to watch the meeting tonight, that I would make mention of this. And thanks again, Troop PAC 238. It was my pleasure to be there. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
And John?
Just say thank you to the rest of my council members for the appointment on President Pro Tem. Appreciate that. And request that Councilman Meister give us some extra assistance in making sure that the mayor stays healthy through this time.
Well, we can use all the help we can get, John. So. Okay. Anything else, John?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Craig? Craig's still there?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I keep trying to hit my space bar, but if my cursor's not in the right place, it just runs across the screen. So, yeah, I don't have a whole lot other than I just want to thank the street department, the public works again. You know, we've had a little bit of snow and they're doing a really good job of moving that. And I just want to remind our citizens to continue to manage the cars. If you have to park on the street as the plows go by, please try to move those cars as quick as you can before they come out and widen back out to help them not get all of the turnouts left for a few days on the streets. And again, I think just looking through the neighborhoods, most of the people are keeping up with the whole sidewalk thing and keeping those sidewalks passable for all our residents, especially there's a number of them who rely on the sidewalks because they do walk instead of drive. And I just want to remind everybody as we're finishing through, we've been blessed this year so far with a lot less snow than the years past, but just remind everybody about sidewalks and look out for your neighbors and everybody stay healthy. Hopefully with the immunization clinics and everything that are going on, we're getting close to the end of COVID and we can see our way clear of this and get back to a more normal as we remember it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Steve, that's a good lead into your report.
Yeah, so just want to shout out Chief Marshall, the Marshall Police Department, our entire city staff, Southwest Health and Human Services. You know, we were one of 9 pilot sites for the Minnesota State Department of Health vaccine trial, and it's pilot. They are doing some experimenting. There's a lot of bumps in the road. Things went very, very well in Marshall, but they learned a lot in Marshall as well. You know, this is run by the state and we're doing our best. The hospital is a hub. We get a lot of the vaccine from the state and then we just give it out as we are instructed by the state. They now have gone to a lottery system And so that opened up this morning at 5:30 in the morning, and those people who are eligible, people age 65 and older, childcare workers and teachers, were encouraged to get in the lottery, and they'll pull the lottery numbers out, and if you were selected, you get in. Interestingly, a lot of people, and when I say a lot, probably the majority of people who ended up getting those vaccines last weekend on Friday and Saturday were not from Marshall, were not from Lyon County, were not even from Southwest Minnesota. They're coming from all over the state. So that's, again, learnings for the state to act on. That. But the good news is we're getting the vaccines out for COVID. I would encourage everybody who is eligible to sign up on that website. And it's at the Minnesota Department of Health website. Do not call Southwest Health and Human Services, Southwest Public Health. Do not call the hospital, because we don't have anything to do with it. It is a Minnesota Department of Health issue. And we can't pull any rank and put people on. There's just no way to do that. So the best way now is to make sure that we're still wearing our masks, still socially distancing, washing our hands. If you're sick, you stay at home, and keep doing what we've been doing. We're seeing the numbers go down a little bit, which is a good thing. And hopefully as we get more and more vaccines, we can expedite our return to normalcy.
Thank you, Steve. Anything else? Okay, we'll move then to
No, sir, I'm done.
Don.
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I'll have just three things building on what Russ had said about our involvement of young people. We're in the last few days of the Mayor for the Day contest with young people. That's been publicized on the city social media site, and that's really being coordinated by Amanda from Community Services, who's doing the organization work on that, and young people can submit something in writing or a picture or whatever, and then looked at, and then we'll select someone who will probably be recognized at a future council meeting. I'd also just add to what Dr. Meister had brought up about the vaccine clinic, and once again commend the professionals that we have in this community and in this region. I did receive a call from the governor the day before. It was actually Monday morning before the announcement came out. He made it clear that Marshall was selected for a variety of reasons. One is geographically it made sense, but secondly, there is a capacity here in terms of facilities, in terms of the region, to really serve the region, and so I think we should feel good about that. And I'd also commend the kind of the quick thinking of some of the organizers when on Saturday it turned out that there was some extra capacity to provide additional vaccinations. That, you know, that word went out. I know it was on our social media, and people responded very quickly to that. So we probably were able to have more people take advantage of it than originally anticipated, just because of that kind of quick management thinking to utilize the capacity. And again, as Steve mentioned, this is ongoing. So hopefully, over time, more people will receive the treatment, receive the vaccinations, so our businesses and organizations and schools can be open, and our people can enjoy good health. The final thing I would mention, I think probably Sharon, you're going to talk about tomorrow. It will be the employee recognition event for the employees of the city of Marshall, which is going to be done, of course, very differently this year. But nonetheless, it's important because as council, as a community, we really appreciate the dedication, quality, and the services that we enjoy because we have really good people working for us. So with that, I'll pause and then go on to the next item, which is staff report, starting with City Administrator Sharon Hansen.
That employee recognition event is on Thursday.
Oh, excuse me.
And I think Sheila will send a reminder. I know, although as the mayor mentioned, it's going to be different. Hopefully we have a good turnout and some good feelings from that particular event. It was a challenging year, as most of us already know and have discussed on many occasions. But just real briefly, a lot of conversations in January. Government often doesn't produce widgets, so I can't produce something in physical form, but just a lot of conversations with a lot of different people. EDA staff, Lyon County discussions, SRDC, Schwann's, YMCA. We've had some discussions with them on pool and services, staff meetings, and City Hall. I know that for some of the council members, maybe you have not been able to get a chance to look inside City Hall. If you want time to do that, please let us know and we'll arrange it with Ray or the construction supervisor who's on site. And obviously I know City Hall committee has, but it's really taking shape, and you can start visualizing a lot of the spaces in between. And today, Council Member Lozinski mentioned local government aid and what's going to happen with all the budget concerns at the state. So I'm thinking by him mentioning that he's indicating to me that we should start working on the 2022 budget and levy just a little over a month from the time that we pass the 21 budget and levy. But we'll do our best and we'll look into that as soon as we can. I haven't heard anything about LGA, and the governor just released his budget recommendations. I didn't see anything just on the short snippets, but we'll see. So that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Any questions for Sharon? If not, Jason?
Thank you, Mayor. Kyle, if you hit on number 23 there and go, there's a memo in there. I'd just like to update the council that MnDOT District 8 is planning a concrete pavement rehab and diamond grinding project that includes a portion of Highway 59 through Marshall, identified in red on the map there, between Highway 23 and Lyon County 6. It'll be largely just a grinding project where they'll run a diamond grind over it to give the surface some roughness, essentially smooth out any imperfections as well. That'll be done. There will be a detour in place. That's the green route, because the portion of the project between County Road 6 and Marshall is 2-lane. So when they're doing the work there, they'll need to detour the traffic. But the portion of the work on the 4-lane section through town will be done under traffic with 2 lanes open and passable at all times. Should be a quick project, just about 2 weeks in July or August. And there's a link on there to MnDOT's website if you have any further questions about that. There's no fiscal impact to this project for the city. We may get paid some for the detour use of city streets, Saratoga Street, but that'll be really minimal. If the council has any questions about that project, I can help facilitate that. I personally don't think we need MnDOT to come speak, but they have offered to come to the council if we have any, if we'd like them to. And I don't know if that's desired, but if you'd like that, you can let me know. So this is just information only. And then thank you, Councilman Schaefer, for the words about snow removal. The crews do a nice job and get things done pretty efficiently for us. But we would ask that everybody try to get your cars off the street during snow events or after snow events, so we can more thoroughly clean our network. And if that's a message that the council can help us spread, that'd be appreciated as well. But I think that's all I have.
Jason, I had a quick question on the Highway 59 project. And, not that you have the answer to this right now, but maybe something to check on would be at the intersection of Highway 59 and Windstar. for those traffic that would be going directly across from one side of Windstar to the other side, is there going to be any softening of any of those slopes on the lanes?
No.
Okay.
No. That would take more significant work, and I am quite certain that won't be in this contract. This is just a mainline lanes grinding project to reinstate the surface with some roughness and maybe take out some imperfections.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Jason? If not, Dennis?
I have nothing.
Okay. Remaining items are the information items, including the building permits and the listing of upcoming meetings. Is there anything else to come forward tonight at this council meeting? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So move.
Motion by John, seconded by Craig to adjourn. Discussion? If not, by voice vote, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Motion passed. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarity too, I shut my video off earlier, not to be rude or to stand off, but I've had a lot of fracturing tonight on the audio, so I shut my video off to try to save some local bandwidth here, hoping that it's just my end that's the problem. So that's why.